For months now, Javid felt something shifting between him and Yasmin. Something subtle but undeniable. It was as if a quiet wall had slowly been building between them, brick by brick, without either of them truly acknowledging it. Every touch, once full of warmth, now felt distant. Their conversations, once long and effortless, had dwindled to brief exchanges, filled with empty pleasantries rather than the laughter and connection they once shared. It wasn't that they fought, it was something worse. They didn't fight at all. It was the silence that scared him, the hollow, oppressive quiet that settled between them like an unspoken truth. Yasmin seemed different, withdrawn, her eyes no longer lighting up when she looked at him. She was there, but she wasn't present. Javid tried to push the growing unease away. He told himself it was just a phase, something they would work through. He tried to be patient, understanding, but each passing day only deepened the ache in his chest. Something was missing, and he didn't know how to find it again. He longed for the spark they used to have, the passion, the ease, the intimacy. But no matter what he did, she kept pulling away. It was one of those nights when the distance between them felt unbearable. He reached for her in bed, desperate for the closeness they'd once shared, but she flinched. The rejection was so quiet, so subtle, but it hit him like a cold wave. He froze. He felt the weight of it settle in his gut. Something had changed, and he didn't know if he could fix it. He didn't know how much longer he could keep pretending everything was fine. Javid lay awake in bed, the sound of Yasmin's steady breathing beside him only amplifying the silence between them. He had tried to sleep, but every time he closed his eyes, the image of her pulling away lingered in his mind. He could still feel the coolness of her body as she turned away, the rejection hanging in the air like an invisible fog. It wasn't the first time it had happened. No, it had been happening for weeks now. But this time, it felt different. This time, it cut deeper. The silence in the room felt suffocating, and Javid couldn't shake the feeling that something irreversible had happened. He had tried to ignore it, to pretend that everything was okay, but her withdrawal was becoming impossible to overlook. It wasn't just a lack of intimacy. It was the absence of everything that had once made their relationship feel alive. The easy conversation, the shared glances, the laughter. What had happened to the connection they once shared? Javid's mind raced. He replayed every moment, every conversation, trying to pinpoint when things started to slip. Had he missed a sign? Was there something she hadn't told him? He had tried to be understanding, patient. But now the doubts were creeping in, doubts about himself, doubts about her. Was she still in love with him? Or had she grown tired of him in ways he couldn't understand? The rejection the night before echoed through his thoughts, over and over, each repetition making him feel smaller, more insignificant. He knew it wasn't just about the physical rejection. It was the emotional one that stung the most. She had pulled away in a way that made him feel invisible, like a shadow in his own life. He had always prided himself on being able to fix things, to find solutions. But this was different. There was no easy fix, no quick answer. He could sense her distance, but he didn't know why it was happening. And even worse, he didn't know how to reach her anymore. The uncertainty gnawed at him. What if this was the beginning of the end? What if the woman he loved, the woman he thought he knew, was slipping away, and he was powerless to stop it? The morning sunlight filtered to the curtains, casting a soft glow over the room. Javid had barely slept, his mind spinning with a million questions he couldn't answer. He stared at the ceiling, tried to ignore the ache in his chest. Yasmin was still lying beside him, her back turned, her breathing steady and deep. Yet, despite her proximity, there was an ocean of distance between them. The rejection from the night before still lingered in the air, thick and heavy. He wanted to reach for her, to pull her close, to do something, anything. That would bridge the growing gap. But a part of him was scared to touch her again. What if she pulled away again? What if this time the distance was too much to overcome? But then, just as he was about to turn and slip out of bed to escape the suffocating quiet, he felt her stir beside him. Yasmin shifted, her body turning toward him. Her eyes opened slowly, meeting his with an expression he couldn't read. For a moment, she said nothing, just stared at him as if she were searching for something in his face, something she had lost in herself. "Javid," she whispered, her voice soft, almost tentative. He turned his head toward her, trying to mask the turmoil in his chest with a weak smile. Yeah. She hesitated for a moment, and in that pause, Javid felt his heart tighten with anticipation. What was she going to say? Could she sense his hurt? Did she even care? I'm sorry, Yasmin said, her voice barely above a whisper, but there was sincerity in it that made Javid's chest tighten. I know I've been distant lately. I didn't mean to push you away. Her eyes welled with tears, and Javid's breath caught in his throat. He had been expecting anger, indifference, maybe even more silence, but not this. Not this vulnerability. Yasmin, he reached out to her, his hand shaking slightly. She let him take it. But for a moment, she just held his hand in silence. They lay there for a few seconds, neither saying a word, but the air between them had shifted. The silence was no longer suffocating. It was filled with something else. Regret, longing, and a strange sense of hope. She stopped, her voice faltering as she gathered her thoughts. I've been scared, Javid. Scared of losing myself. Scared of losing you. Of losing us. I didn't know how to keep both things together. She paused, biting her lip, as if the words were too painful to say. Javid's heart pounded in his chest. He wanted to say something, anything to reassure her, but the shock of her words left him speechless. He had expected her to push him away further, not to open up like this, not to show him the vulnerability he had desperately wanted to see. I've been so afraid of getting too close, she continued, her voice shaking now. Afraid that if I let myself feel too much, I'd lose control. So I built these walls, and then I pushed you away to protect myself. But I don't want to lose you, Javid. I didn't know how to let you back in. For a moment, Javid could only stare at her, trying to process the raw honesty in her words. The weight of everything she'd been carrying seemed to be pouring out now, and it hit him like a tidal wave. He felt a rush of relief, mixed with sadness, as he realized how much they had both been holding back. He reached for her then, pulling her close, holding her tightly, as if somehow he could shield her from the vulnerability that had almost torn them apart. I'm here, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out. Yasmin. Together. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like they had taken a step toward each other, not away. As Javid held Yasmin in his arms, the quiet weight of her confession hung in the air. The vulnerability she had shown, the tears in her eyes, the hesitation in her voice, felt like a crack in the dam that had held back all the things they had never said. But as he lay there, holding her, the pieces of their relationship began to fall into place, and Javid couldn't help but reflect on how they had gotten here. How had they reached this point where silence and distance had replaced the intimacy and connection they had once shared? They had been so in sync when they first met. There had been something magnetic about Yasmin, the way she smiled, the way she spoke with such warmth and conviction. At first, their relationship had felt easy, effortless. They would spend hours talking about everything and nothing, laughing over shared memories, debating the smallest things with passion and joy. He had felt so certain then, so sure what they had. He could see their future unfolding with her by his side, a life of adventure and growth, full of love. But over time, something changed. Javid couldn't pinpoint when exactly, but he started to notice a shift. It wasn't dramatic, not at first. At first, it was small things, a late-night text that went unanswered, a missed dinner because Yasmin was too tired after work, the way she would become more withdrawn when he tried to talk about their future. Slowly, the connection they once had began to fray, almost imperceptibly, until one day, it felt like they were living in different worlds. Javid had tried to hold on, to keep things the way they were, but she had become harder to reach, emotionally distant in a way that made him feel like he was walking on eggshells. The more he tried to reach her, the more she seemed to pull away. It was as if there was an invisible wall between them that he couldn't break through. Every attempt to rekindle the spark seemed to fall flat. She would smile politely, nod in agreement, but the warmth was gone from her eyes. He had started to question what he was doing wrong. Had he become complacent? Had he failed to recognize the subtle signs that she was slipping away? Was it his fault? He had tried to focus on his own growth, thinking maybe it was the right thing to do, to give her space, to give her time to breathe. But the more space he gave, the more distant she became. The phone calls, the late-night talks, they became fewer and fewer. And when he tried to touch her, to bridge the gap with physical closeness, he would often find her pulling away, the warmth of her body suddenly turning cold. The night of the rejection wasn't the first time he had felt that coldness, but it had felt final. She had become an emotional ghost, walking beside him but never truly with him. Javid had tried to rationalize it, telling himself that maybe she was just stressed, or maybe she needed some time to work through personal issues. But deep down, he knew it was something deeper, something he couldn't see. He thought back to the small things she had said in passing over the months, how stressed she'd been at work, how overwhelmed she felt by the constant pressure to succeed. Yasmin had always been ambitious, a go-getter, but recently, it seemed as if the pressure had begun to weigh on her in ways she couldn't express. Her perfectionism had seeped into every corner of their life together, turning small imperfections into insurmountable obstacles. He had tried to be supportive, but as her stress grew, so did her emotional distance. And yet, despite all of that, Javid couldn't shake the feeling that something more was at play. She had always been fiercely independent, but somewhere along the way, she had stopped letting him in. She had started to shut down, and he couldn't figure out why. What had caused her to build this wall around her heart? Why had she started to view his love as something she had to protect herself from, rather than something that could make her stronger? As Yasmin lay against him, her body finally relaxing into his, Javid realized that there had been a moment when he stopped being a partner and became just a bystander in her life. Maybe she hadn't meant to push him away, but the accumulation of small hurts, unspoken fears, and hidden insecurities had created a chasm between them that neither of them had known how to cross. In that moment, Javid understood something important. It wasn't just that Yasmin had been pushing him away. It was that she had been running from herself. She had been scared of what their love could bring, terrified of vulnerability, of the emotional closeness they once shared. She had wanted to protect herself, to keep the walls up, but in doing so, she had distanced herself from him, and from the very love that could have healed her. And as much as he wanted to reach into her soul and pull her out of the isolation she had built, Javid realized that only she could tear down those walls. He couldn't fix everything, and he couldn't change her fears, but they could face them together, if only she was ready to let him in. The air between Javid and Yasmin had never felt heavier. After their shared moment of vulnerability that morning, the silence returned, thicker than ever. Javid had tried to go about the day as if things were normal, but the knot in his stomach refused to loosen. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were standing at a precipice, one wrong step away from falling off the edge. It wasn't just a rejection from the night before anymore. It was everything. Every unspoken word, every unacknowledged fear, every silent moment where they both knew something was wrong, but pretended otherwise. He couldn't stand the tension any longer. That evening, after dinner, as the quiet stretched on, Javid knew it was time. He could no longer ignore the gnawing sense that they were on the brink of losing everything. He couldn't sit back and wait for her to open up anymore. He had to know, once and for all, what was going on with them, and why they were both drifting further apart. "Yasmin, we need to talk," he said, his voice steady but laced with frustration. She looked up, her expression guarded, as if she had been waiting for this moment but didn't want to face it. "I know," she whispered, her gaze dropping to floor. "I've been waiting for you to say that." He took a deep breath, his chest tight with the weight of everything he wanted to say. "Why are you shutting me out? Why did you pull away last night? You've been distant for so long, and I don't know why. If there's something wrong, if you're not happy, I need to know. I can't keep pretending things are fine when they're not." Yasmin's face softened, and for a moment, Javid thought she might break down again. But instead, she straightened, her voice wavering. "I didn't want to hurt you, Javid. I didn't want to admit that I'm not okay. I didn't want to pull you into the mess I've become." He felt his heart tighten at her words. "What mess?" "Yasmin, we're supposed to be in this together. If you're hurting, I need to know. I want to help you." She looked at him, her eyes full of fear. "I've been so afraid," she whispered. afraid of losing myself in this relationship. I've been so consumed with my own expectations, would try to be perfect for everyone, especially you. And I lost sight of who I really am, what I really need. The weight of her words hit Javid like a wave. He could see it now, clearer than ever. This wasn't just about their relationship. Yasmin had been carrying a burden, one she hadn't shared with him, one she couldn't carry alone anymore. Yasmin, his voice broke as he reached for her hand. I'm here. I'm not asking for perfection. I just want you, all of you. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let her guard down. She finally let him see the truth. And in that moment, Javid knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But now they had a chance, if only they could face their fears together. The silence that followed their conversation was different now. Softer, more reflective. Yasmin's walls had come down, and for the first time in what felt like years, Javid could see her fully. The weight of the secret she had been carrying was finally out in the open, and though it hurt, there was a sense of release in the air between them. They both knew that this wasn't a magic fix, that the road ahead would still be difficult. There would be moments of doubt, moments of fear, and plenty of hard conversations. But for the first time in a long time, they were on the same side. Yasmin's vulnerability had cracked open the door, and Javid stepped through, ready to help her rebuild, piece by piece. I'm not asking for perfection, Javid whispered, taking her hand. I just want us to try, together. Yasmin nodded, her eyes glistening. I want that, too. I don't want to lose us. They didn't know what the future would hold, but they had a new understanding, one built on honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to fight for each other. The aftermath of their pain had birthed something fragile but real. Hope. It wasn't the end of the story, but a new beginning.